Do certain relationship patterns just keep repeating themselves in your life? Have you ever noticed that? You have many different relationships, all sorts of different kinds of people, different times in your life, you're different ages, you've had different experiences, and yet there's this common theme of this wound that always shows up. Well, that's Chiron. And we're going to talk about Chiron today. And I'm going to talk specifically about Chiron within our relationships and how to identify those wounds and what they mean and why they keep showing up. And then ideally, how to heal them. It'll be a really interesting conversation. By the way, I'm not the Perkins of electroastrology, and this is Awakening with Astrology, where I am covering different facets of astrological archetypes. I have tons of videos on YouTube. I'm also releasing this on my podcast, Star Narratives. So dive in. There's plenty of content that is already there, just waiting for you to absorb. Currently, I'm talking about Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer, and we all have Chiron in our charts. And Chiron can be really difficult to deal with. It's that part of us that always feels like we're limping along, like we are a victim of circumstance, or the wounds that are just so deep that even if we know they're there, which sometimes we don't, it seems almost impossible to heal them. And yet, Chiron is such a wise archetype. It brings you into some of the most potent work that you'll do as a human on this planet. If you guys have not registered for my season by season Equinox Vision, it's my free astrology workshop. I'm going into the astrology of the spring of 2025. If you're listening to this in the future, just go to my website, electroastrology.com. I'll probably have some sort of other offering for you to help you understand astrology and to help you understand yourself. You can register for that workshop at the link below in the box on both the podcast and Star Narratives. And a little bit about me, I teach astrology not just from the perspective of your standard sun signs and here's what it means in your chart, but I'm integrating astrology, psychology, and spirituality into these teachings because it's less about knowing what your sun sign and your moon sign is. Those things are important, but it's more about recognizing that we each have every single one of these astrological archetypes within us, regardless of what's going on in our chart. We have everything. And astrology is a really powerful way to understand your own psychological nature. And when we understand ourselves, we understand more about how the world works. We are less likely to be in the grips of our past trauma, collective drama. It's really easy to get caught up in the things that don't matter or the things that hold us back unnecessarily. Understanding yourself, and there's many ways to understand yourself. This isn't the only way, but this is a really organized way. So if you have a brain like mine and you like to have things organized so that you can easily understand them and make sense of them, you're going to love the way that I teach astrology. All right, well, we're diving into Chiron today. This is the second of the Chiron talks. If you missed the first one, make sure to check that out. Today, we're going to look at Chiron in relationship. So, of course, it makes sense that if our Chiron wounds are the things that we experienced over and over again from being in utero till about age 9, and who are we living with from that time? It's usually our parents, our family of origin. It's safe to say that we learn a lot about relationships through those early years, those formative years. And depending on how your relationships looked with each of these people that you were living with and interacting with primarily, depending on how their relationships were with one another, we learn a lot about what we think we need in relationships. There's a familiarity, there is a modeling that we pick up on. And we also learn a lot about who we are by how our parents, our caregivers, our siblings, our family, and then, of course, when we get into school in the elementary years, we learn a lot about who we are by how people respond to us. So we are very relational. We have to be in relationship. We cannot be solo and independent in our first 9 years of life. It's not possible with humans. And of course, because humans are difficult and we're all flawed in our own little ways, we develop wounding around that. Depending on where your Chiron lives in your chart, we each have a Chiron. It will land in a different sign depending on what year you were born in, and it will show up in a different house depending on what time of day you were born in. And so we each have a unique Chiron, which I will talk about in a later episode. I'll go through Chiron through the signs and houses because I think that's a really helpful element of doing this work. But we know that regardless of what the specific themes of our unique Chiron is, that we are all dealing with the wound, the fear of abandonment, the fear of rejection, struggling with trust, with emotional walls, feeling like love is conditional or we have to earn it, overgiving, neglecting our own needs, right? These are just a few examples of how our Chiron wound will feel. And I want to do a quick exercise with you just so that you can get a sense, a felt sense of how this Chiron wound might be for you. So go ahead and close your eyes if you're in a place to do that. Take a few deep breaths right into the central part of your body and just begin to do a body scan. Notice what it feels like in your body as you're tuning in and bringing your attention inward. You might feel like you need to stretch. You might need to adjust your body. You might notice that your clothing is constricting you and you need to adjust it. This might be the first deep breath, conscious breath that you have taken all day. So as you take a minute to just be with your body, what is drawing your attention? Specifically, something that is uncomfortable or painful. Maybe you're noticing you have a headache or your digestive system is out of whack. Maybe you're noticing that you have some sore joints or some sore muscles. Whether you're just now noticing it or whether you've been well aware of it, I want you to just take a minute and give some attention to that discomfort. Imagine that you're breathing some breath into whatever that pain is. So, as you're aware of this pain existing in your body, become aware of every other part of your body that is functioning, that is driving, that is listening, that is walking. Whatever you're doing as you're listening to this teaching, we're still functioning. We are in discomfort and we're still living our lives. We're still doing what needs to be done. And so to just know that there is something that's uncomfortable, there's a pain, there's a discomfort that's going on in your system, and you're still walking around living your life, doing your work. And that's how the Chiron wound can be. Of course, the wound is many different wounds all under the same umbrella. And we are always operating with some of these painful things happening. And yet we're still in relationship, we're still doing our thing. But typically, what happens is that when we are interacting with others, that Chiron wound can get triggered. And we may not know it right away, or we may feel it immediately. But at any rate, it's like this chronic pain that's throbbing in the background, sometimes more quietly than other times, while we are interacting with the people around us. So think about something like a fear of rejection, or a fear of abandonment, or a need to people please, an understanding on some level like you have to earn your love. So imagine how those things, being the pain that's always throbbing in the background, imagine how that is going to hold you. So again, we go back to this pain that you're noticing in your body. Let's say that you have a bit of a headache and you're still living your life, you're still doing your thing, but there's going to be a low grade exhaustion that's happening, maybe an irritability, just a sense of like, I would rather be anywhere but here. I just want to go rest. I just want to do something to take care of myself, to tend to myself. And I think that that is in large part what our Chiron wound is always pushing us to do. There's always an underlying sense, if we can become conscious of it, because as we know, it's really hard to be conscious of this stuff because we are on autopilot. We are living our lives. We do have stuff that's going on that has to be managed. And we're also in these relationships that can feel really familiar. So your headache might feel familiar. It might be something that's always going on for you. Your digestive issues may feel really familiar to the point that you don't even really notice them, but in some low level way, they're impacting you. And it's the same thing when we're in relationships. I might worry that I'm going to say the wrong thing, where I might hold myself back because I don't want to be made fun of. I may overdo and overgive because I want to be seen as a useful, necessary part of the dynamic. And yet, over time, we begin to see that is not working for us. It begins to make us exhausted in our relationships or resentful of the people that we're relating to. So I talked last time about the attachment styles and how this would be a really useful thing for you to look up and research a little bit about. What is your attachment style? Are you somebody that's more prone to being avoidant, where you're going to hold your partner at arm's length, where you're going to feel a lack of nurturance, where you're going to be guarded and protected so that you don't actually have to get that close to somebody, so that you don't actually have to really face the wounds because you're distanced from them, right? This is the example of someone who has had a headache all day and didn't even really notice that they had the headache until they brought their attention to it and they realized, oh, wow, I've had a really bad headache for a few hours. No wonder I'm feeling so irritable. Maybe you're more of an anxious attachment person where you never feel like there's enough. You always feel lack. You're always worried that somebody is going to leave you, that you're going to be left alone. And this could be the example of somebody that is very aware of their pain. They've been feeling it all day. They've been stressing out about it, wondering what's causing it, wondering what to do about it. So I'm going to give you some examples of ways that you can actually connect in on a physical level, on a psychological level with some of your wounding, because ideally what we're trying to do is notice it when it's happening. We're trying to bring our attention to it so that we understand this is a wound that's been triggered, so then I can move into the healing phase. When our wounds are activated, it offers us a path toward healing. So another thing to look at is your love languages. There's a lot of information about all of this stuff online, so you can check it out. But knowing your love language can also give you great insight into some of your deep wounding. Now, we do tend to attract people that either match our Chiron wounds or they trigger them. We unconsciously attract people that will mirror our struggles with self-worth or our ideas around conditional love. When we know our love language and we can see ourselves acting out our love language, then we can also get a sense of like, wow, have I had a wound that's just gotten triggered? So, for example, if your love language is acts of service, you might find yourself overdoing, overgiving because you want to be seen as valuable. You don't want to be abandoned. If your love language is physical touch, you might find yourself anxiously seeking out physical touch. And, knowing something like your love language is a really helpful thing because it can open up deep conversation between you and your partner so you can better understand each other. But knowing your love language can also show you very quickly where you might have an activated wound. So, in the same way that as we take deep breaths and we sense into our body and we notice that there's some pain and suffering going on, once we notice it, then we can seek to take care of ourselves. We can drink some water. We can get some more rest. We can take an Advil. And that's really the point of Chiron. Chiron is a healer. Chiron brings us the medicine, and we all come in with certain wounds that we need to learn to heal. If you remember in my last talk, Chiron was a healer, he was a teacher. First, he had to heal himself from his abandonment wounds. And because those were so painful, he ended up spending a lot of time examining his emotional vulnerability. As we understand our own issues, our own childhood wounds, where we feel unsafe, and the kinds of relationships that we pull in as a result of those wounds, those are generally the relationships that teach us the lessons that our soul is here to learn. And Chiron had to learn those lessons. And then he would bring that information out to teach others how to do the same. For a minute, if you wish, recall one of the relationships that you've had in your life that has been on the more difficult side of the spectrum. And when you think about that relationship, does it hit you anywhere specific in your body? You might have felt it right in your heart. You might have felt it in your sacrum, in your intestinal area. What did you learn from that relationship? What aspect of yourself did you have to heal? I think generally what we find is the most difficult relationships are the ones that teach us the most. We have to learn about boundaries or learn about self-trust or learn that even when we are abandoned, that we are still okay, that we're still lovable. Or the lesson might be around it's okay to leave relationships that aren't working. We can also get more positive messages, like it's safe to be seen. It's safe to be who I am. It's safe to allow somebody to see all of my imperfections. And you may come to realize that you don't have to earn love, that love is something that can be freely given. But when you think of the trajectory of your relationships, see whether you can come up with three things that have been repetitious messages for you through your most difficult relationships, the wounds that have been activated. And then have you learned along the way some of the medicine that was really helpful for you to heal? And sometimes that medicine is going to come in the form of relationships with others. You might have a best friend who you share things with, who helps reflect who you really are back to you. With Chiron, there's a requirement for deep self-reflection and for spending time alone so that you can integrate what you are learning. But it's also important that we are within relationship with others because our Chiron wounds aren't necessarily here to be healed and forgotten about. They are the kinds of wounds that will resurface in deeper and deeper levels as we are doing our personal work. And I think that one of the things that's so cool about Chiron and our wounding is that we eventually are helping other people heal. So you eventually become that best friend that can reflect to somebody that's struggling in relationship. You eventually become strong enough and secure enough that you aren't pulling in those same relationship patterns anymore. You're actually pulling in partners that instead of triggering your wounds, are the partners that are here to help you heal. And I think that's something that's really exquisite about Chiron. Yes, we can feel victimized. Yes, we can be limping along and repeating the same patterns. And yes, we can be traumatized by our childhood experiences, and that doesn't necessarily go away. But there's a gift. The more willing we are to just understand the pain, to be with the pain, to sense into where that pain keeps showing up and how it's helping us, the more we self-understand, the more we become empowered to not be a victim to that pain and suffering in the same way that we always have been. And then we take our wisdom and we help other people to figure it out. So our Chiron wounds start off, we feel alone and lonely and like nothing's ever going to get better. And we progress through life and we become this wealth, this well of wisdom that can touch not just our own experience, that can help heal generations in our own family of origin, but also helps to shine that light of reflection onto the people that surround us. So we become the person within our relationships that is wise, that is a healer. And, if we're lucky, if we are doing our healing work, then we become an attraction to other people that are also doing their healing work. And imagine when a bunch of powerful, wise healers get together. Imagine what they can create. Next time, I'm going to talk about Chiron as it relates to generations and the work that we all do collectively when Chiron is in a sign in the sky. So for today's work, we're looking at a much more personal level and saying, where are my wounds? What are the places, even if we simplify it, what are the places in my own body that are always causing me pain and suffering? And how has my relationship with those places helped me to grow? How does that pain in my body actually remind me over and over again to tune in, to take a minute and ask, what do you need? How can I help you heal? When we're on autopilot, that pain can go on for hours and days and months and years at a time. And then we're just low key suffering. With awareness, we can tune in, we can seek to heal, to solve, to grow so that that pain is not always there impacting us. Doesn't mean the pain won't come back periodically, but we're gathering the tools. And we say, oh, I recognize this. This is familiar. I remember how I healed it last time, and I'm going to try that again. And if that doesn't work, I might need to get introspective and quiet. I might need to tune into my intuition to see what needs to happen next. So spend some time with yourself this week, looking into the places in your physical body that have pain and in your emotional and spiritual body that might have pain. Look at some of the relationships that have similar dynamics that you keep pulling in. What is being triggered? What would healing those triggers look like? All right, I hope this was helpful. See you all next week.